The first thing that PhD students find out too late is that accountability is so very important. And importantly, it does not come from where you think it's going to come from. Accountability is your own ability to drive yourself. A lot of people feel like the supervisor, the project, the postdocs, the other people in the lab will be your accountability partners. And they can be if you ask them. But you know that feeling that you get when someone cancels a meeting? That's sort of like freedom that sort of like washes over you. The supervisors get that same feeling if you cancel on them. And I've been in situations where I've been able to delay a meeting week after week after week because no one cares. They have their own things going on. And I'm like, oh, maybe we can delay it a little bit. And they're like, oh yeah, perfect. Let's do that. And accountability and getting to the end of a PhD really means making sure that you are delivering something every single week. Every fortnight at least, you are delivering a research presentation. You are talking to your peers, your supervisors, and accountability comes down to you and no one else. It can be really hard to keep yourself accountable, but one of the things I did was every fortnight is produce a lengthy PowerPoint document with all of the graphs, the figures, schematics, and everything else that I needed and to show people that I'd produced in the previous 2 weeks was there. That, even if I sent it off to my supervisor via email, even if it was just like shown to my lab mates or, other people in the same project, that was what I used to keep me accountable, and you should be doing something similar too. Another thing that PhD students find out too late is that inspiration doesn't really get you a PhD. It is not about that burst of activity in your mind that's like, oh, now we can do something. This is amazing. Let's go do that amazing experiment we've been thinking about. You never really have that, maybe every so often, but you cannot rely on it to get you a PhD. So what it's about is slogging through daily activities, setting yourself a daily goal, doing one thing every single day, making your PhD 1% better every single day. Look, I was reading this book once, and this is something that stuck with me, and it was saying, it was talking about Olympic athletes, and it was talking about well, how do some people go on to become Olympic athletes? And they asked a trainer, loads of people start running, lifting weights, going to the gym, but what makes them capable of being Olympic athletes? And the one thing that really stuck with me from this book was that it was their persistence and ability to do the same thing every single day. Not everyone can do that. Not everyone can do the same power lifts, can do the same training exercise every single day to get to greatness, and in your case, to get to your PhD. So that sticks with me even now with this YouTube channel, with the businesses that I'm growing online. Just doing something every single day, no matter how boring it feels, will get you your PhD. So inspiration is completely overrated. Just think like an Olympic athlete and do that boring activity every single day. This video is brought to you by my newsletter. Go check it out at andrewstapleton.com.au/newsletter. The link is in the description. When you sign up, you'll get 5 emails over about 2 weeks. Everything from the tools I use, the podcasts I've been on, the perfect daily abstract, and more is exclusive content only available for free. So go sign up now. One thing that PhD students and PhD graduates find out too late is that the postdoc treadmill is real. Now, the postdoc treadmill is for people who have completed their PhD and go on to do further research at a university. The postdoc treadmill is when you get postdoctoral positions in a university that never end. You are on constant short-term contracts because, you can't find a permanent position. They're not going to give you a permanent position. So you're on these short-term contracts. The shortest term contract I ever saw was like 2 months, which is just insane. And I found data on a sort of summary of post-PhD employment that talks about this. So here is a fantastic publication. I think you should go and read it or at least skim the graphs. So here they have careers of doctorate holders, analysis of labour market and mobility indicators. So it's from 2013, and let's just check out a couple of these graphs. I'm going to go down to page 16. Okay, so across all of the different countries in this study, you can see that the employment rate for doctoral holders by gender is really quite good. You know, we're talking well above 80% for people being employed after they get their PhD. Fantastic. The problem is that in this data, I think, is hidden a really serious problem, and that is underemployment and also short-term contracts that really aren't represented in this study, and they kind of allude to it here. So we can see down in this bit, unfortunately, it proves extremely difficult to measure the postdoc phenomenon. And what they're talking about are these postdocs, which are short-term temporary positions which aimed at consolidating or improving research training. And by the way, these are relatively new positions, you know, in terms of how long academia has been around. The cynic in me really likes to think about this as the fact that universities saw this really desperate cohort of people and they were like, oh, we can get really cheap research manpower. And they mentioned that in this article as well. I don't think PhD students or graduates think early enough about their career options and opportunities. Now, let's have a look at another study that looks at where PhD students and graduates end up. Now, this is a pretty cool study where we've got 10,000 PhDs from the University of Toronto, and they've looked at where they've ended up. Let's go down to some of the graphs. Scroll. Not that one. So where did they end up? Major employment sectors of the University of Toronto PhD graduates. So you can see that actually tenure track professor is relatively high. I'm pretty impressed with that, to be honest. 26%. But look at all the other places you could end up. You can, stay in academia, you could do postdocs, professional, you could become a college lecturer, but then there's private sector, public sector, charitable sector, individual sector, other, and unknown. The unfortunate thing is, as PhD students, we do not spend enough time thinking about where we can be employed. Having options, having opportunities, finding out what actually excites you about your future can really help you sort of push you through your PhD because, you know, you're excited to get to the end and sort of like move on to that next thing. Unfortunately, universities they weren't set up, I think they're getting better at it, but they weren't set up at providing quality career advice to PhD graduates. So that's the issue here. Think about your career, where you want to go, much earlier on than you think. And I would argue, before you even start a PhD, have an idea of what you want to do with it. Effective note-keeping is so important and we think about it far too late. I know that I read something in a research journal and I'm like, where did that come from again? You know, like I know I've heard this somewhere. So keeping effective notes in a reference manager like Mendeley, EndNote, or just a simple sort of note-keeping app will help you when you come to that moment where you're like, I just need that one reference. I know I read it somewhere. Where is it? That will help you so much. Also, effective note-keeping in terms of making sure that you have all of your figures, your analysis, your tables, your schematics, somewhere where you can access them. And do you remember early on this video, I said that every fortnight I produce a PowerPoint document with each slide being a table, a schematic, a figure of what I had done of the previous 2 weeks? I can tell you something now. They were so beneficial when it came to writing up because all I had to do was copy and paste some of the tables and graphs and schematics that I'd created like a year ago, 2 years ago into my thesis, into my publications, and it just makes it so much easier. So make sure you keep effective notes, not only on your references, but also on all of the outputs that you will need in the future to write your thesis or peer-reviewed papers. Every fortnight, produce that PowerPoint document or a Word document and actually sort of like produce the figures and tables and everything as if you were going to publish them in a journal. And I can assure you, you will come back to them at some point. The last thing I would say is that PhD students and graduates find out far too late that their supervisor's opinion of their work and them is not truth. As a PhD student, you tend to sort of like put a lot of energy and effort into satisfying the PhD supervisors or your supervisory team above you. And I think I learned too late that those people are just people. They are fallible. They are moody sometimes. They are emotionally led. They do not always give constructive criticism that's in the best interest of you. And so that can be very sort of very damaging to your own own self-esteem, your feeling of self-worth, your imposter syndrome can flare up. So I often sort of like used to remind myself that these are just people, and even though, you know, they're university educated, they've got PhDs, they've been doing research for ages, they are also very, very flawed, just like every other human being. And I used to find myself, if, you know, I didn't get the response that I really wanted from a PhD supervisor about an idea that I'd had, I would often go and speak to other academics about my idea and sort of like stress test it. I didn't rely solely on my supervisor to really sort of get an idea of whether my ideas were good, bad, or otherwise. I could often take that idea, hypothesis to another academic in a similar field and get a much better response and where I should head with that sort of like particular line of inquiry. So yes, PhD supervisors, listen to them, but also don't listen to them. So there we have it. There's everything you need to know about what PhDs find out too late. Let me know in the comments what you would add. And also remember to go check out academiainsider.com. That's my project where I've got my ebooks, the Ultimate Academic Writing Toolkit, as well as the PhD Survival Guide, as well as the Insider Forum. And I'll see you in the next video.